Baby.
We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause we been.
Y'all better get comfortable with saying black.
We in here, yeah, we in here,
Black versus the Board of Education.
'cause we can't get rid of us now. We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause we can't get rid of us now. And you know that we don't ever go, so you do what you want.
That's why we are indeed a whole mood.
That's it.
And a whole mood is what will continue to be. Hello, 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 and welcome to another Monday episode of Black versus the Board of Education. My name is Miss Lorene, and I'm the captain of the ship, and my co-captains are all in the building, especially my baby girl. My baby girl's in the house. We're going to go around and get introductions so you know who's in the building. But before we do that, we are coming off of a weekend of Legislative Open House 2026. And I just wanted to ask you guys, because Melissa, this is your first time being here. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Fox, this is your second time with Legislative Open House. I just want to get some feedback. How do you guys think it went with the kids?
I think it went really well. You could see at different points in time when there were different activities that the kids were really engaged and asking questions, especially when Fox was up there presenting. They were asking lots of questions and really engaging with the material.
Okay.
Things that you could tell they had never heard before. And you could tell there were subjects that they were really interested in and didn't know about, especially when we were in the Capitol and you had the people who were sitting in the chairs and the positions explaining things. And there would be like those light bulb moments where you could tell that they were really interested and asked a whole bunch of questions. We were running out of time. One last question and 5 more hands go up.
Right.
It was really, really interesting. I enjoyed it.
Amazing. And for those who don't know what the Legislative Open House is, it's when we take young people from throughout California to the state capitol and they basically function as legislative officials for the day. Mr. Fox, how do you think LOH 2026 went this time around?
I think it's something that's still it's still coming out of us. It was a lot of surprises seeing them youngsters argue back and forth about bills, seeing how much knowledge they had themselves. Mm-hmm. In actuality, there was 2 type of youngsters there. There was youngsters there who they was asking a lot of questions. They was engaged and they was going back and forth with us, getting the knowledge. And then there was youngsters there who was furthering the knowledge they already had. Mm-hmm. They came with it, and you could tell when they was reciting the bill, they had knowledge that wasn't on the paper. I was like, oh, what did he say? And
right.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And it made me. The LOH is something that gave me worth of my job to see those babies advocating for themselves in the situations that they was. The many of the situations that happened around the state capitol allowed me to see how these kids advocate for themselves on school grounds and what makes somebody so mad when they speak up. They're speaking from a position of a little person with a little body with so much knowledge, and the knowledge would lead you to believe there's some authority behind it. Mm. So an adult would listen to a youngster talking like, "Oh, next he about to tell me to go to my room because that got to be next." And he's only 8, so the adult will probably look at it like, "I ain't got to hear that." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because he's coming with so much knowledge. But another good thing that I liked about LOH was the adults. For a kid to be so excited to see the state capitol, it was double the excitement for the adults who had never actually been inside of the Capitol. Yeah. They was just as they found themselves in situations where they were trying to teach their class, but they was looking around, taking pictures of themselves and things around the Capitol with themselves. And the third thing I would have to say would be the most funnest was we had the right chaperones and the right staff for the situation. I give props to everybody that was there and those who were not there. Who, if you had an integral part in LOH, whether it was a phone call, an email, something, I give props. It was something that the team put together. The team put together and everybody, they participated, they helped, they made that work. But like I said, the third thing that I was the most happiest about was the staff we had. Although we was in the Capitol, we was not rigid. It was not a staff of you have to sit down. I was able to give a baby a piggyback ride up to, it was little things that we was able to do inside of the Capitol that you're not supposed to do.
Build community.
But we was able to let them know, hey, we still cool. Hey, don't touch the, okay, go take the picture. Hurry up. Take the, all right, let's go.
You let them get away with a little bit too much, but we're not going to even go there.
The state Capitol was good. The knowledge was presented well. The drug information we gave them was well. They presented a drug bill so well that I hope that when they speak of drug, they need to go get our babies.
Yeah,
Talk about them
for
drug.
sure.
They spoke a
For
lot
sure.
about them drug bills.
Yeah, and I just have to give a shout out to one of the young people. Very, very impressive. I believe his name was Gift. Gift let them have it on the opposition of the fentanyl bill. And if you've never heard these young people actually stand on their square and come up with reasons why putting fentanyl education into the school system was not a good thing, or mandating that for K through 12, Gift impressed us all. So big shout out to Gift. And as we're talking about, advocating, we actually have a really great show for you today. This week we're talking about, actually, we're sitting down with a Sacramento County Office of Education District 1 candidate, Davon Thomas. This isn't a campaign stop. It's a conversation. We're asking the questions families actually care about: accountability, discipline, equity, student voice, and what leadership looks like when systems fall short. Because elections have consequences and our students tend to feel them first. And if you want a firsthand knowledge of that, you can look at what happened with the striking school districts around this community. Our kids are going to feel it. So before you vote, hear directly from the person that is asking to represent our schools. And so Mr. Davon Thomas is in the building. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Black versus the Board of Education.
How you doing, brother?
But before you speak, really quick, give me one quick second. I want y'all to know who's in the room, because I know everybody was talking, but you don't know whose voices you're going to hear. So I'm going to start with the ladies over here. Mama P.
Mama P, I'm a director says I'm just so juiced to be sitting by our baby right here.
And we saw Mom's comment in the in the chat. Hey, Mom.
Live in the flesh.
Live.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa, and this is my first episode in studio in all, 6 years that I've been with BYLP.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really, really excited to be here. It feels very surreal to see it all in person instead of from behind a screen. So I'm really excited to be here and excited for the conversation.
And we're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're here. And our lone voice, the gentleman voice that you heard from,
Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox is in the building. And now, are you?
Y'all.
What you say?
Happy to see all y'all.
Are you happy to see us? Hey,
yeah,
go ahead,
fine.
take a
Happy to
picture.
see
Go
all
ahead,
y'all.
take a picture. No. Our gentleman who's joining us, Mr. Davon Thomas, he's going to give us his introduction, because although I said what he's running for, I want to know a little bit about you. So tell us about you, Davon.
Well, before I start, I will say we're not only coming off the heels of your event, but Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler winning Oscars last Sunday. I was very excited to see that. I've been following both of their careers for over a decade now, and so I think we're talking about Black youth. I think we talk about the arts, especially, is very interesting. The arts are my expertise, but that's something that's been on my mind a lot in the past week. And it was last Sunday that it happened. So hello, everyone. My name is Davon Thomas, and I am running for the Sacramento County Board of Education for Area 1, which includes much of our central city here in Sacramento. So that's Midtown, Downtown, East Sacramento, and then Lamb Park, Oak Park, Hollywood Park, Curtis Park, Tahoe Park. Yeah, I know all the parks. River Park, much of our central city. And so a little bit about myself. So my family has called Sacramento home for 75 years. We have called Oak Park home for the same amount, but 65 of those years in the same house in South Oak Park. And I really lead with that because I think the foundation of who I am is someone rooted in community. And my great uncle, who has since passed on, used his military benefits, back in the day, where I had 7 great uncles. I believe nearly all of them went into the military. And because that was the way to kind of build a middle class and background, was to go and serve and to get those benefits there. And so he found, bought our home, and this has been a foundation for my family. So they moved here from Davenport and Jackson, Mississippi, many, many decades ago. This house has been the house where everyone goes. I had to give up my room to a cousin who, many decades older than me, because he was trying to move his family out here. So we shared a room for like 6 months, right? Like, this is a place that my family has been able to call home. And many people in my family have called it a home for decades now. So I lead with that, because when I talk about leadership, when I talk about why Sacramento, it's because I'm rooted here. So growing up, I grew up here in Oak Park, and I attended St. Hope Public Schools. So PS7 Elementary, PS7 Middle, and Sacramento Charter High. So I'm a proud dragon. I'm the 9th dragon in my family, I believe. My grandma says it doesn't count because it's a charter version. She loves to mess with me and say that. I grew up here, and I was actually part of their original kindergarten class in 2003. And I was only one of 4 that stayed from that original 2003 class till senior year at Sac High. So I spent 13 years going to school here in Oak Park and the charter schools here. And during my time, I was vice president of my Key Club in high school, doing a lot of volunteering and service work, chaired the Sacramento Youth Commission, so got to do a lot of civic engagement work in high school. Then I went off to UC Santa Cruz, go Banana Slugs, where I had the most amazing time of my life at Santa Cruz. Got to leave home, leave the nest, and really grow into this young leader that I am. I got to serve as vice president and president of my student body at UC Santa Cruz, and got to do a lot of amazing work there, which is I'm really grateful for the experience there. Came back, served in the Capitol for 1 year as a Senate fellow for former state senator Dr. Richard Pan. Shout out to Dr. Pan. And then I got my master's in public administration from the University of Washington in Seattle. So I spent 2 years in the Pacific Northwest. And I won't lie to you, it was too cold and too wet for me. I prefer the dry heat here in Sacramento. So never going back to Seattle. That's not Sacramento is home. I'll tell you that much. And since being back home, I found a new wind and a new sense of community and security here in Sacramento. I've been active with the Sacramento County Young Democrats. I currently serve on the Sacramento Children's Fund Planning Oversight Commission. So we got to invest a lot of millions of dollars into youth. And I've also served previously on the Oak Park Neighborhood Association Board of Directors. And so I'm running for the Sacramento County Office of Education primarily because I want to focus on outcomes and improving the outcomes for students across this region, for all of our students. So focusing on mental health is a starter for me, addressing our teacher shortage, fiscal accountability for all of our schools in this region, as well as expanding and really ensuring they have technical education for these students, as well as centering our foster youth and our incarcerated youth. So growing up, my father was incarcerated, and he grew up in East Oakland in a time where being a young Black man was, your goal was surviving. And he's been incarcerated in various various times throughout my life. And we didn't have the best relationship growing up because of that. And, I remember in high school getting collect calls from him while he was incarcerated. And, while I was simultaneously trying to act like everything's normal and focusing on SAT prep and SCT prep and going to college, right, and applying for that. And so I have a very vested interest in supporting our incarcerated youth and our foster youth who, SCOE specifically focuses a lot on students that are kind of on their second and third chance, who have been incarcerated, who really just need an extra opportunity, and where a lot of people see them as problems, I see them as untapped potential. I think these are amazing young folks who don't get the energy that they deserve, and that's why I'm running.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Don't answer everything that we have to ask you in one breath.
Sorry,
brother.
I've been told I'm a yapper, so apologies.
No. That's good. But what you will see in a second is that the time is going to run out really, really quickly. And we want to encourage those that are watching, go ahead and say hello in the chat, as well as if you have any questions that you want to ask this young man. You said Davon, is that how you pronounce your name? Yes. Okay, I want to make sure we get it straight, because we got to put some respect on it. Davon is here, and we are taking your questions in the chat. But I wanted to start off, why are you the right person to represent students and families in District 1 right now, like right in this moment?
So one, because my family, as I mentioned earlier, has a roots going back 75 years in this community. And I think what we need are folks with the lived experience in these communities. When I think about the SCOE schools, I don't think about, folks chasing titles. I think about students who are predominantly Black and Latino, who are predominantly from working class and low income families. And I come from a community where these folks are people who I look at, and these are my neighbors. When I went to St. Hope, all my peers were predominantly Black and Latino. And so I think for me right now, it's about centering those folks, those voices. And right now, SCOE doesn't do, in my opinion, a good enough job. And I think right now the board has been very relaxed on the accountability for our schools, and the accountability looks different in a lot of ways. And so right now, I'm already doing this work on the Children's Fund. Right now, we're one of 9 commissioners where we've invested millions of dollars into foster youth, mental health, early childhood education, violence prevention. So I'm already doing this work at the local level as a 27-year-old, and I want to uplift that. And speaking of being 27, I think a lot of people look at me and think, Davon, I think being young is a deficit for your campaign. I say I think it's a strength. I think the issue is that SCOE is a very sleepy agency that needs to be woken up. There are people there that run for SCOE to run for SCOE, not to uplift all these school districts and the children in the region. And I think there's a very archaic model on there right now. And so I think for me, I come here with the goal of uplifting everyone, not just running for this hidden board and kind of hiding behind it and not being active in the community. When I talk to local school district trustees, they don't know who their SCOE trustee is. They don't talk to them, and vice versa. And so I think a really big thing for me is making sure we have established community, relationships, and, a lot of conversations have to happen here locally, and they're not happening. You talked about the strike. What part of that is SCOE's responsibility to address this work? And we can get into that later. But I think that ultimately this
we will.
I'm sure we will. This agency is very sleepy and very tired. And I think it takes a 27-year-old who's active in this community and wants to engage to be doing this work. And I think the archaic model that exists now is doing a disservice to the children of this entire community.
Mr. Fox.
I like your energy. I like your energy.
Thank you.
I like that. I like your energy.
Thank you.
I'm gonna revamp this question for you too. It says, my original question was, what do you believe the biggest disconnect between school systems and the communities they serve is? However, we know the answer to that. So I'm gonna twist that question around and say, what are you in your position that you're going for? Because I your energy, you said people tired, the system sleep. I agree with all that. What are you going to do with what the disconnect is between the schools and the system? From your position from SCOE, what powers do you have, and what are you going to use, or who are you going to connect with, or how are you going to do it to connect whatever the disconnect between the school systems and the parents is and the communities are? What is your solution to it?
So one, I think soft power, and I'll start off with there and saying just simply being actively engaged, right? Showing up to neighborhood associations, showing up to spaces that do not support me and like me. I think there's also a thing with egos of elected officials where they only go to places that endorse them. And it's like, I've done student government, high school, undergrad, and grad school. If you only show up to places where people like you, you're not actually doing your job and representing the community, because you have to go to people that do not like you. There are people who are already lined up behind my opponents, and that's okay. And if I win, I'm still going to engage in those people. So one is showing up and being actively engaged is for starters. Two, looking at who in our systems are represented in this community, right? So if we feel like our community advisory committees or our local control advisory plans, right? Are these committees and boards and commissions that we have under us, look who's there. Who has the capacity to be there? The people who have the capacity to show up in their free time to do this work are typically people with the wealth and access to give up time at work, right? Yeah. And so whatever we can do to ensure that there are people from diverse communities that are showing up in these spaces, a good opportunity to voice their concerns is important to me. And I want to be honest with you, code switching is a very real thing that a lot of people have to do. And I don't want someone to feel like, oh, I can't code switch, so I can't advocate for my family, my children, my community, because they can't. You have a voice, you have a lived experience as a parent. And so I think already engaging parents and not judging them. I think when we talk about predominantly Black and Latino populations, I think of folks who feel like they do not have the words or know-how to advocate for these folks, for their children and their families, and then they just don't show up. That's why people don't go to public comment for SCOE, because no one knows what SCOE is. First of all, I'm running for SCOE. Everyone's like, oh, you guys had the bad budget. No, that's the other school districts. That's not SCOE, because people don't even know what we are, because the trustees there are hidden and they do not engage in the community. Now, about hard power, I think we could also try to engage and see if it's possible to participatory budgeting, right? If we have unrestricted funds that can go out to the community, funds that can go out to CBOs or organizations, like, let's engage the community and ask, where do you think this money should go? Let's actually tell people your voice and your vote and your involvement in this process will determine where this money is going. And that's also accountability aspect for you. This is your decision, right? And, if it doesn't work out, we have to have a conversation about what doesn't work and what does. But I want to be actively engage these folks. And the agency is extremely sleepy. So I think also really tapping into these predominantly like Black and Latino spaces as well, whether it's Black Leadership, project, or it's the Black Parallel School Board, or the newly formed Latino Parallel School Board, right? I think being actively engaged in these communities is really, really important in my eyes.
What?
One more time.
The what board?
So there's the Black Parallel School Board.
No, you said a newly appointed a Latino something.
And there's it recently was created a Latino Parallel School Board.
Oh,
okay.
So the Black Parallel School Board was been doing this work for decades, and because of that model, we're seeing other communities adopt it as well. And so I think for me, seeing that is really important. Then we talk about connecting communities and really believing in intersectionality, right? We don't have these same lived experiences as other ethnic groups, but we have similar experiences, and the harm of these systems can afflict us all. And what can we do to ensure that all these voices are elevated, right? So I'm a firm believer in using the soft power, using my microphone and my voice to amplify this work, and also call out school boards and elected officials who are not doing their job. But also, to the hard power, the votes, is really to ensure that we're also engaging the communities, and we have money there that we can serve as a grant hub to this community. I want you to be actively engaged. I want you to tell me, what do you think this money should be used for? Just as a kind of an idea.
Thank you for that. So the next question is, well, first I want to say I was a St. Hope parent from K through 8. So I see you there. That's what's up. I appreciate you being from the community that you're trying to represent, because so many times we see politicians get another apartment or house and use the address and try to advocate for a community that they truly don't live in or they truly don't have ties to. So we appreciate that piece. The other question, I would love for you to elaborate on the examples around SCOE being sleepy and tired. For folks that are not necessarily active in this work, it might come across as vague, because they don't understand like what a county office of education has the power to do, and how, you know, all the money runs through SCOE before it gets distributed to these districts. But if you're not going to school board meetings, or you're not going to SCOE, or you're not, you know, in tune to the ways that funding in these communities work in regards to our schools, you might not know that. So if you could elaborate on that. And then, you know, the next question is, when systems fail students, where does accountability actually land, and where should it land?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer this as kind of
two questions in one. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I'm gonna try to answer this as one umbrella under accountability. I'll probably follow up for the second question again in a little bit. Okay. What I will say is this: you're right. People aren't aware what SCOE does, and people have to understand it goes, you know, local, you know, Sac City Unified, Elk Grove Unified, Twin Rivers. That's your local unified city school districts, and you have your county board of education. So the county board of education runs their own schools. To be clear, many are court and community schools, which are for students who have been on their second, third, and fourth chance, or possibly have been incarcerated throughout their life, right? But what we can also do is charter school renewals and petitions. And then also, you know, when a school district is essentially, you know, having their budget, they submit their budget to get certified by the county office of education. And if their budget isn't certified, you know, the SCOE will say we're not certified, or you're in the red, so on and so forth. So it kind of serves as an additional accountability aspect and arm to this. And I also want to talk about, you know, St. Hope in a little bit, but really just charter schools as a whole, because accountability is for our public schools and our charter schools as well. And it's both, and it's not one or the other. And so when I think of the kind of relaxed ways of SCOE doing stuff, I will even talk about, you know, kind of waking it up, but more the accountability aspect for this community. One, right, when we talk about Twin Rivers and they had their strike, right? A part of their strike was, which they just got their agreement yesterday, part of their strike was the fact that the SCOE superintendent, you know, so essentially there's a state law that says 55% of your funding, you know, for school districts funding, so on and so forth, has to go to teachers, classroom aides, et cetera, right? And you can get a waiver to not do that 55% from the superintendent of the county board of education. So Twin Rivers board has applied for that waiver for a few years now, which has amounted to $115 million skimmed from teachers in the classroom, right? So when we talk about being a very relaxed or sleepy agency, what it means is allowing that to happen while knowing your teachers in this community are working 2 jobs and can't show up with full energy and a full night's rest, because 25% of them are working second jobs to make it by, right? So waking that up and acknowledging that that is part of the reason that led to a strike, but no one knows that. Twin Rivers gets the brunt of it and rightfully so, as their Twin Rivers. But nobody knows that part of that reason is $115 million that was skimmed from them for the past 6 years that goes to consultants, etc. Right. So I think that's an example of accountability and really trying to wake up the agency. Right. Another example I would say would have to be really the lack of investment in my eyes. When I think about the fact that, I was looking, over the data, 6% of the students in some of the schools at SCOE can read at a proficient or, meet the grade level, and, 2% can do math. That's terrifying. And so that is, and there's a dashboard, I can find it for you and then send it to you afterwards. I want to make sure I have that right. But that was what I saw it just a week ago. And I think about the fact that who are these students? What do they look like? What is the income level of their communities they come from, right? And what systems allowed them to be placed in SCOE schools, and what systems failed them in their local unified school districts in the first place, right? And I think trying to acknowledge that is extremely important to me. And this isn't to vilify the school districts at all, but it is to say that our education is not a perfect system. It is to say that, for example, and I think this will kind of, and actually, I'll save that point for later. At one point, I was like, because I'll go on a tangent, right? I think certain situations like that, we're simply waking it up and acknowledging the statistics and saying that we need more investments in these students. We need more, additional aides in our classrooms. And even the aides that we do have really need to be folks who are paid well so they can be in the classroom full force. Because SCOE also deals with a lot of our students with special needs. And so teachers in those classrooms need aides. Like there can only be 10 students in that classroom, but because there's special needs, there needs to be additional support in the classroom. There has to be. And so what happens when you can't find enough of those people to do that job because they want to pay them, right? So there's the accountability aspect. To your point about who, I guess your second question was, who does it fall on when we talk about, can you repeat your question for me?
Yes, when systems fail students, where does accountability actually land, and where should it land?
I think where it's landed is typically it's easy to, okay, I want to make sure I find the right words for this one.
The parent.
So, okay, that was my answer. That was gonna be my answer.
Well, come on, let's talk about it.
No, because here's the thing. I think it's nuance, right? I think one, parents are often blamed. Two, though, it's important to note that if your students are, struggling, right, it's not just the classroom. It has to be reinforced at home. And we have to acknowledge that, right? My mom and grandma did not know algebra or pre-calculus or calculus, yet in that kitchen, late at night, 9 p.m., they're in there with me, helping me go over my math homework and just being there as a presence for me and supporting me in what they could do, right? And so it's important to say we want to ensure that our parents are also reinforcing what the students are learning at schools. But the parents, to answer, the parents are often blamed for all of this.
Right.
And I don't believe in vilifying these parents. My mom had me at 17. And yes, we can say in hindsight, Mom, you could have waited a few years, but you had me. Right. Now, does that mean the system should just let you fail and let you and your child not succeed in these schools? Or do we step up as a community, as bodies that have institutional power and voting policies and money to distribute to the community, to local school districts, to trusted CBO partners? We need to be investing more in them. So I feel like oftentimes parents are blamed, and it's important for parents to reinforce what's happening at the schools, to reinforce it at home. It doesn't just stop when the students leave the school, but oftentimes you see parents being blamed. I think the blame has to be on the greater system as a whole, local, state, and federal. Right. Acknowledging the fact that the school to prison pipeline is still very real and still very alive and still harms so many of our populations. It's to acknowledge the fact that the same military industrial complex that allowed George Floyd to be killed in broad daylight has been terrorizing our immigrant populations and making them too afraid to show up to school because they're afraid of getting deported. It's the same industrial complex that's happening here. And so it's at the federal level and the kind of defunding of education. And at the state level here in California, one of the wealthiest states in the nation, I think we can do more to invest in these students, right? So I think it's really, really important to be able to do more and invest in these folks, whether it's funding, but then also not just money, but how we're spending it, right? I got my master's degree in public administration. I'm really grateful for my time in higher ed. And the big thing about us was implementation, not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it, right? You don't just want to throw money to everyone. How are they use this money? Is it effective? What can we do to uplift and replicate this model and scale it wider? But if it's not working, we have to be able to shift that funding and try again.
Thank you. I have like 15 questions for you. I'm not even kidding. But I'm going to choose one and then we'll come back to me because this paper is full of notes.
It is.
Thank you for being here and giving such thorough answers. It's very helpful to kind of see who you are behind just running and the reason why you are running. Something you said stood out to me. You said you don't want to vilify school districts, but I want to know your opinion on the difference between vilifying school districts and actually holding them accountable, because sometimes they are at fault and it's okay to call them out when they are at fault in letting down the students and some very specific students, Black students, when they are in their school districts. So what is the difference between vilifying school districts and actually holding them accountable?
So I think surface level one, great question. And if we had all day, you can ask me all 14 other ones if you really needed to. I have something at 6. So if you want me here till 5:58, that's fine. I mean, here's my thing, right? So one, I think it's just simply maybe it's just like a language thing. I don't love the word vilifying or villain. I think that's just kind of where my head was at. Okay. So I prefer accountability, right? And I think it's important just to hold them accountable. And I'll give an example. And so you mentioned you were a St. Hope mom, right? I'm a St. Hope baby, 13 years, right? And so for me, I think about the fact that, St. Hope, recently it was reported lost 70% of their teaching staff in one calendar year, right? And so how do you say we're closing the achievement gap for Black and Latino students in Oak Park when you can't retain teachers? Like, let's just be very blunt about that, right? And that is an accountability issue, actually, because what system is being implemented there where you can't retain the people who are teaching your students? And then what happens? Your students have substitute teachers, month-long subs, and are not learning, in the classroom, right? Like that's the accountability aspect. Now, there are people out there that believe that any type of, charter school accountability means you're anti-charter. I don't like that philosophy. But then there are people out there who are so anti-charter, who, here's my thing, right? I'm, supported by our classroom teachers in this race, and also a proud 13-year graduate of charter schools. And when some people tell me they don't like charter schools, I tell them, I understand. I think people have their issues and there are valid concerns about them. But I'll say this. The traditional public school system, especially 2-3 decades ago, was failing our students, and in a lot of ways still is. And I take my grandmother's example as a prime one. She was a single mom in West Oakland, and she sent my uncle to a public school. He was in a really awful environment, ended up in juvie, ended up in jail. So she sent my mom to a private school with her little check. And then when we kind of moved back here to Sacramento, she sent me to a charter school. I don't vilify those families because a lot of these families saw the public school system fail their students. And I think people, some people take it personally. Like, I don't want you to take it personally the public school system failed these students, but I want you to believe that it is your duty to help change that system and rectify so these students don't feel failed and these parents and families don't feel failed, right? And so for me, it really is not, again, about vilification, but accountability. I think any institution that loses that many teachers in one calendar year, I'm not saying shut them down, but I am saying what restorative practices can be implemented here so you can retain these teachers. If you can't retain them, those students are going to fail. That is accountability. So what we do to work on a performance improvement plan, action improvement plans to ensure that those students have quality credentialed teachers in the classroom, right? That's not a vilification of the people there. That's a vilification of the charter school, but it's accountability, because my goal isn't to protect a system. It is to protect students and increase their outcomes, right? And so whether you are a traditional school or a charter school, that whatever system that is, are your students succeeding there? Yes or no? And that's what I want to focus on. So the answer isn't to shut them all down, but for me, it is to say, what can we do to make sure that if your students are in those classrooms, they're being supported in the best way possible? And that doesn't always happen. And we have to hold those schools accountable. They're not to vilify them, but hold them accountable to these populations.
Yeah. And I hear that. And I agree that we need to start holding schools accountable. But I also think that we need to start telling the truth. Some of these people who are in position of classroom teachers should not be there, period. They shouldn't be there. They don't like students. They don't like Black students. And that is evident by the discipline numbers that we see that continues to come out of these school districts. So I understand that you are supported by classroom teachers, but what do you say for the teachers year after year who don't rise to the performance levels, but then come in with their union and bargain on the backs of our kids to get things that they haven't proven they deserve. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, and we're going to talk about it, because what we saw last week with Twin Rivers, I see a lot of faces and a lot of anger, and it's very reminiscent of what we saw in the 1960s about the white mob, right? And I saw them showing up to one of the Black school board president's houses outside her house, her safe place, yelling and doing all these things. So when we talk accountability and we talk performance evaluations, a lot of times these teachers, some of them that don't belong in classrooms, hide behind the union, and the union does not distinguish between good teachers and bad teachers. It takes all of them at face value. So how, in your position with SCOE, and in the event of another strike, what are you thinking that you can do to kind of be the peacemaker in a sense, because we have to call out bad systems, we have to call out bad people, and we have to ultimately do things that put our children in a position to succeed. And that's not, I don't want to mince words about it. Some people don't belong in our classrooms. So how do you hold them accountable?
So I think that's a very necessary question and conversation to have. So one, I'll say this. I think what I don't like is, tying like teacher, pay or performance to, or teacher pay to student performance. A lot more things go into the school and outcomes than simply just standardized testing. And that's also a flaw that I see, is the focus standardized testing and not critical thinking for our students. So I wouldn't want to tie that into, teacher evaluation is just simply student outcomes. I think that's a slippery slope. Can I
ask a question before you move on from that point? Aren't other jobs based on performance and outcomes?
Correct. Oh, okay. But there's also more factors in play for student outcomes than just what happens in the classroom, though, as well, right? For example, you can be at a job, I can't think of a specific job. You could be in a job where a lot of it is simply based off of your performance there, right? But there are so many factors. If we want to talk about systems at place, a teacher or the 9-to-5 space, academic space, can only do so much, right? And so to tie that simply to a teacher performance in the classroom, I would think will always be the most effective solution to this issue, right? I don't think it would be. And to your point, though, I get it. And to your point about, protesting and whatnot in schools, there is a lot of anti-Black racism that goes on in these environments, right? And it's not, and I always, one thing that I always appreciate about my time at Santa Cruz was giving me that language that it isn't just racism, it's talking about anti-Blackness as a whole. Okay. Right. And so I think for me, there are folks out there, there are teachers out there, there are administrators out there and school staff out there who do not see Black students as their students. They see them as a problem. I'm talking about. And so for me, going to a predominantly Black charter school, there was no, I'm going to skip over the Black student in classroom. You couldn't do that, right? Because, the majority of your classroom was Black, right? But I acknowledge the fact that so many of our students are in spaces where they are subjected to and inflicted upon a lot of racism, right? I think in McClatchy, there was an Asian student, about 5 years ago that did a study. It was a really unfortunate one. That white and Asian students have, a higher IQ than Black Latinos, right? And situations like that are terrifying. And my first question is, who in the hell approved this? Yes. How do we get from the start of the project to this, and did no one catch it? Right. There is no mincing that. I agree with you. Right. I had a friend who went to McClatchy, and he said, Davon, and he's white. And he said, Davon, I think, I think it was important for you to go to St. Hope, because I think, you would have been kind of paraded around as, this kind of nice puppy dog to show diversity at McClatchy, because, you probably been the only one of the Black students, one of the more accelerated classes. And so I'm not denying the anti-Black racism that goes along in our schools, from admin to teachers to students there. And I think it takes a lot more, restorative justice. It takes a lot more implementation of anti-bias and specifically anti-Blackness trainings in these classrooms. And how do we unpack that, right? Because there are folks who've been teaching for a very long time who
are retire.
One more time.
that need to retire.
Well, yeah, because they are subjecting students to, you know, this harm, and I don't want to see those students there. And I think, you know, not everybody has access to a predominantly, you know, Black or, you know, diverse charter school or environment, and so I don't want that to be an issue for students where they're going to a public school that doesn't have the majority of these students, but they are still subjected to racism, and that isn't fair to them at all. And so it does take real accountability. And I like to believe that the majority of the teachers that I've talked to believe in that accountability and recognize that anti-Blackness, but there is a very sizable population that is not. And I think it's important to have that conversation in these classrooms, because at the end of the day, that shows up for a lot of these students. They are passed over in the classroom. They are seen as othered. And I think for me, that is very terrifying. And I don't want that to happen to any students. And I would love to really engage with folks who are really good about this work. And, you know, specifically when it comes to accountability for staff, I actually want to engage and see what restorative models have worked, what additional training needs to happen, right, for teachers to be able to be prepared to teach students from historically marginalized communities, from Black and brown communities, where just because a student has their hair braided in a certain way, or because they came in the classroom with a do-rag, or because they speak in a certain environment, that they're not judged for being who they are from the community that they're from. Right. And a lot of them are, right. And I open this up with Ryan Coogler, because if you talk online, people say he doesn't code switch. He doesn't. And that's a really important thing. I think code switching is a survival tactic, but a lot of these students don't always know how to do that. And they're vilified for not being able to do that in the classroom. And I want to protect them as much as possible.
Yeah. And before we move to Mr. Fox's question, I just want to put it out there. We are not anti-teacher. No. My mother was a teacher for over 30 years. My stepfather had a career as being a teacher. I am not anti-teacher. I'm just anti-BS. Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I'm not anti-teacher. My auntie Ma was a teacher. We all went to school, but I do believe in a different level of accountability. I'm gonna slide back to off a conversation Melissa was having about the difference between accountability and vilifying. Yes, my auntie Ma was a school teacher. I went to school and all that. Vilifying and accountability. I'm gonna lead you to my question, but I'm gonna give you some context before my question. My nephew's 3 years old. A school teacher that he goes to school to, that we just pulled him out of, taught him how to spell Nigga. Then taught him how to spell Nigger. He's one of the only Black kids in the class. Rest of the class white. My first question when this information was told over to me, to my sister, was, well, if they taught him how to spell that, who did they tell him that was? Because they had the rest of the kids in the class, out of all the rest of the kids, somebody had to say, well, what is that? Mm-hmm. This is on the same brink at the same time when I seen that baby got hit with the shoe. I also seen another thing online where the school teachers, they was having a meeting, and the lady didn't know the mic was on. The mic was still hot.
I saw
and
that
she
too.
said, blah, 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 Black and this and that. Now, accountability and vilifying. I'm seeing brothers and sisters that we come in and we in these fields and we speak and we saying we hear this is what's going on, and a lot of us, we're coming through the door with something that a lot of people didn't do before. We're coming to the floor saying, I'm willing to admit I don't know everything. I'm just a part of the solution. You can be in charge. I'm not trying to be in charge. That being said, when we see brothers, they come up and they say we run and we want to hold these systems accountable. I believe that we do got to vilify these people. Some of these people, they shouldn't be there. A lot of our people have already said that we're putting our kids in a system that wasn't meant for us anyway. To continue to do so, somebody has to point out the wrong and the right. Now, I said it to say this: a kid can go to school right now, upset, angry, whatever have you may be. Like you said, do rag, whatever. The teacher looks at him, says, "Oh, you got a do rag on. You this, that. Boom, you out of class." But when they do that, they're gonna say the kid. He didn't want to listen to us. He was violent. He was aggressive. He was all this. However, what does it take for an adult to get up every morning, be mad, drive in your car, know you mad, get to work, pissed off, no, get your coffee, no, you don't have your coffee, then be mad, then see the do-rag? That's not evil. That's not an adult picking on a little kid. That's not to be vilified. These are situations where sometimes conversation is over. Some things, conversation just be over. And I'm not against teachers. I'm against the way the system is being ran, and I'm against the fact that we brought solutions to system, and the solutions were not followed by the people that you put in play and hired to do so. I've been in so many IEP meetings and 504 meetings where I heard stuff like what you said. They said, this kid is 400 pounds. We don't have no aid to lifting right now. Well, when are you going to get one? Well, right now we have Miss So-and-so. You have one aide for a class of kids who, again, special needs. Special and I'm not going to get off into the definition of special needs because I feel like it would be disrespectful if I even start saying that. But how do you, as a person who runs a institution, I'm the head of this institution. I am the principal. I am the sole responsibility for this whole institution. I'm suspending kids about this thing left and right and getting them out of here and all. But I don't have enough sense in my bone to put $5 extra together to put a pair together for a kid. Like, I mean, that's not that to me. These things don't get vilified. These people don't need to be talked to. Some people
need to be fired.
You need to be fired. And so now that's leading up to my question. My question is, you coming into this system, I myself, all of us are accountable for this. But you coming into this system, you say Scully's asleep. People are asleep. What are you going to do to really wake it up? Because in order to wake it up, it's not the babies we need to talk to. Right. It's the adults. The adults are afraid of the baby. Somebody, before you seen that paper you read with it, somebody else seen it too. They all seen the statistics. They all ignoring these emails. They all. My point is, as an adult, what energy are you willing to bring to the adults in the system, and what are you willing to do with the adults who won't work with you?
So one, I think that's a very unfortunate situation to even hear about your nephew having to go through that. So I am sorry to even hear that. So that's one. Two, I want to reiterate that I don't think there is any place for anti-Blackness in our schools at all, whether it's students, teachers, staff, school board members. And I'd be curious to learn, because to your point, though, I tell you all the time, I'm not an expert on every single thing that goes on in our school district. I'm not an expert, right? But I want to be a steward for good governance and to improve outcomes for these students. And knowing the fact that literal racism will keep these students from being able to thrive in these school and environments is part of the reason why I'm running and genuinely care about this work. And so when it comes to working with these adults, here's the thing. The school board has 7 people on there. I want to be this person that believes in building coalitions, who has a 7-0. We can build coalitions, create these really awesome policies that is about restorative justice, about, really addressing who has been suspended and expelled. You can look at the Black student landscape that SCOE did about a year or so ago, and really addressing who's overrepresented in the suspensions and expulsions in these schools. And I would love to kind of have that 7-0 majority, everyone who's on board with me. And I believe in that consensus coalition building. But make no mistake, if I have to get only 3 more people and have a 4-3 vote every single time and have that iron fist of you are literally not doing your job, fix it, or that's a problem, then so be it. Right. I think for me, I don't want to willy-nilly, like, for example, like superintendents of school districts. Right. We had a new board come in to Sac City, and they made a kind of agreement with the former superintendent for them to leave. Right. And I'm not coming in here trying to fire everyone, but it is to say that I have a vision for the school because I'm the elected trustee for this area. And if you're not going to help me implement my vision, do you have a purpose here? Right. And so for me, I think we talk about waking it up. Yes, maybe I just am not as aggressive, and as maybe I should be about this. But make no mistake that I do really believe that once I get a solid majority on a board like this, that as long as I have that majority, real change will happen there. And I want the people that are already there to buy into that vision. But what happens, to your point, when you have staff who are pushing against your vision, right? Right now, Sac City's having, budget issues, right? And you'll see some of the school district trustees saying, you know what, like the staff here are pushing back against the school board and not implementing what we're saying, right? And what we're directing them to do. And, everyone in the comment is saying the same thing. Why are they still there if you as their board is saying we want to do this? And that's a valid question. That is a very valid question. We can't justify overpaid bureaucrats, because again, that's what also happens in these schools. You have a lot of overpaid bureaucrats while students and staff are, fighting for the finite dollars we have. Well, you have bureaucrats who overpaid, right? And at the end of the day, I want you to be part of my vision. Hop on this gravy train, and we can do this together. But if not, then I think there is a valid conversation we had. Like, well, if you don't want to work with the school district, then if you don't want to, help implement the vision that I have, then why are you here? I want your expertise. I respect you as a full-time staff member, but ultimately, why are you here? And I see the comment, the enemies aggressively want to be passive. I think that's a very valid take, actually. I think we get so caught up in decorum and niceties that we kind of forget that for real systemic change to happen, you have to be a lot more assertive and aggressive in this work. So I completely acknowledge that. Now, I'm no expert to your point, though, about labor law. And so what I would love to do is really work with folks who are in leadership of our schools and say, well, how are we going to work in this system if your staff do not want to do what the school board has told them to do?
Right.
Why are you here at the school district if you don't want to listen to the school board that was elected to really create a vision for us to follow? So I'm no expert in labor law, but I think for me, I don't think if you're working in a school district, I hope you believe in the student first model. But if not, then we have to have a conversation about why are you here anyways, and really work to find a better use of our time. So I don't think that's I don't disagree with you in the slightest, actually.
Thank you for that. We know that anti-Blackness is an issue in Sacramento County as a whole. It permeates through, every school district, every county office of education, programmings. We know that Black students are disproportionately disciplined, suspended. We know that there's a lack of access to culturally relevant curriculum. The program that you spoke of earlier at McClatchy, my daughter is in that program right now, is one of the only Black children in the program, transitioning from, Black charter schools, coming into these environments where, she's one of few Black children. And we know that if you don't have an active parent helping you navigate these programs, because the incident you spoke of was like 2018, 2019.
I remember. Yeah.
Right. This wasn't too long ago. This was right before COVID. So we're dealing with anti-Blackness right now.
Right.
And for that, for it to make such waves, that's good, the attention that it got, but it shouldn't have been able to get through
that
right
far in the first place. Exactly.
And so we know that's rooted in anti-Blackness. And so my question for you is, I'm a mother who, has had to advocate time and time again, especially with my daughter being in predominantly white spaces. But we also know that there are issues with other schools that, don't fulfill and serve our students the ways that they need to be. But why do so many families feel like they have to fight to be heard in the first place? I've dealt with very racist teachers, very racist systems where if I didn't know what I know, my daughter would have fell through the cracks, or she would have been a victim of anti-Blackness that, affects her mental health, her social emotional learning, and her access to like high rigor academics. Why are we still having to fight anti-Blackness in 2026 in the city of Sacramento? That's one of the most diverse cities in the nation. And how will you help families ensure is a hard word. How will you help families navigate the ability of having to fight so hard to be heard in the first place?
Here's the thing. The first kind of answer, the umbrella answer, is that, anti-Blackness is rooted in the fabric of this nation, and it is the most profitable economic thing that this nation has, right? When we talk about our prison system and who's incarcerated and the free labor that comes along in our incarceration system, right, it's predominantly melanated bodies, right? Absolutely. And so it's also a very profitable system that I think it permeates in a lot of spaces. In regards to, here locally, and I guess how to support students and whatnot, and really try to address it. I think one big thing for me is mental health, and something that I believe in firmly. I know some people don't. I know I grew up, luckily in a very pro mental health family by a lot of peers whose families thought the prayer was a solution. And so I'm a firm believer in mental. I know it's a thing. I grew up in a Baptist church. I understand. And so. One, I want to start there and say the mental health is really important for me, because when we talk about, mental health, I think a lot of people go to, for example, like, we go to like, unfortunately, say the word, suicide, etc. But I also think about the fact that it's also simply your self-esteem and how you view yourself in the mirror, and how you're influenced by that is who is around you and how they're treating you, right? When we look at the statistics, we'll see that, LGBTQ students are 5 times more than likely to, attempt suicide than than the straight counterparts. We know Black students, it's 19% more depressed in this community. Our most depressed populations are Black students and our LGBTQ students. They are the most depressed ones. And when you talk about rising rates and whatnot, I think about the fact that there's also the anti-Blackness that's led to students not feeling seen in these spaces. And so what I want to do to help students, or specifically their parents, is one, to just be extremely real and honest with them and prepare them for this work, right? Something that I've noticed in a lot of these political spaces is the weaponization of process. Robert's rules, the order. I know, exactly. And
more than one person.
I know, and stuff like that is the reason why these families have to fight so hard, because the people that are behind the dais rather hide behind the process than take accountability for the outcomes and what brought those students and those parents to public comment in the first place, right? Like I went through this even as a candidate. Process this, process that. Just be upfront with me and stop bullshitting me. Right?
How about that?
Like that's really, really important. It's simply not hiding behind process. So I think really family engagement is really important. I want to hone in on the question we had earlier, right? We're just talking about the fact that parents are often blamed in a lot of this work. You can't expect a student to thrive if their parent isn't thriving, right? And the household isn't, right? And so investing more in what we can do, and this kind of goes to my point about, even to Mr. Fox's point about waking it up.
Right.
I think the County Board of Education, and I say I run for SCOE to uplift all these school districts and the children in this region. And when I say that, I mean it, because SCOE should serve as a connector to all these school districts in the region. Why are we navigating isolated hubs? If Twin Rivers and Sac City Unified are both saying we have an issue with chronic absenteeism, and then this school district saying, and that school district saying that, and they're all trying to find out their own solution, why isn't the County Board of Education bringing everyone together to find a county solution to this issue, right? And so when I think about, a lot of these students and a lot of these parents, think about the fact that we're getting very sleepy and not awake at the wheel and trying to engage these folks and bring them in. So to that point, though, that was an example, really to invest in a lot of our family supports, right? If SCOE can really have a robust, active family engagement department where we're able to be, have paid staff to connect parents to county's resources, to resources for healthcare, for food, knowing the fact that when we talk about anti-Blackness being, in the fabric of this community, in this nation, it's the food deserts. It's the fact that you live next to a freeway, so you're expecting, you have more health chronic issues, right? It's the fact that in this heat right now, our poorest communities are the ones in the oldest schools that do not have running AC, right? And these students and these teachers and these parents have to constantly advocate and fight for that when it should just be happening already by default, right?
Absolutely.
And so, and I think that's one of those things that the county board should be a connector and a hub for a lot of these issues, and they're not. And so for me, whether it is kind of creating, I know, acknowledging the fact that, like, I know we're at time at 5:30.
Yeah, one more question, please, Davon, because we gotta let the baby have the last question.
I'm about to leave, you guys. I gotta go to BBS, I just want to say thank you before I leave out of here, brother. And one of the things you did teach me in this session today, as you were speaking, that you pointed out, weaponizing process. They do that. They do weaponize. But thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody.
And we got one more question. Melissa's gonna shoot you one more question.
So in one sentence, so you said accountability is important to you. So if elected, how should this community hold you accountable? You talked about the difference between vilifying and accountability. But if something happens, if you do something that causes parents or someone else to vilify you, how would you expect people to hold you accountable? In one sentence, please.
One sentence. Call me out on my bullshit. I can't do one sentence. I'm sorry, but that's the one answer I'll give you. Call me out on the BS. But here's what I will say, right? Whether it is blasting my email, calling me out, showing the public comment, and calling me out on it is a very good way to hold someone accountable. Also, making sure that if I got elected, you don't re-elect me. You make sure you find somebody to take me out, right? Like I'm a firm believer. If someone's not doing their job, you find somebody to run against them and say, you know what? We appreciate your 4 years of service, or maybe we don't. You got to go, right? And so I like to believe that I'll be tapped in enough into the community to not have that happen. But I will say this: I believe in restorative issues. I'm not going to be a perfect elected official at all. I'm going to try my best to be. But hopefully the first step is, hey, Davon, where was your logic on this? Why did this happen? What could we do to rectify this issue? And at that point, if I'm not giving you the time of the day or disrespecting you, then at that point, you have to be ready to take somebody out and find a new replacement for them as a trustee. Because I don't believe we should be having people who are keep getting elected to office who are just kind of sitting idly by without the accountability. And that's why I'm running. I don't think the SCOE is doing enough for accountability for our schools. And so that's why I'm running. And if I fail in that mission, you got to find somebody to run against me.
Yeah. Okay. And I know we said one question, but I have one too.
Go ahead.
So we know that SCOE only purview is to give directives. They have no direct way of holding schools accountable. They can suggest things, but there's really no lever or no mechanism that really makes a school district do anything that you all are saying. So with that being the point, how do you begin the process of calling schools out? Because the landscape, the Black landscape that SCOE did put into play has not been implemented. And so how do you encourage the staff who have yet to implement this document that came out last year? And you have to implement it in all the county schools, not just your schools that you guys have purview over, but the ones that are outside of your purview that you have to give directives to. So how do you get this landscape functioning, or the recommendations contained in the landscape into the schools that you can only advise but not really make them do anything?
So one, definitely trying to focus on implementing them in the schools that we do have control over. But to your point about the schools that we don't have control over, I will love, because it only came out in the past year. And so I will really love to really kind of do a joint meeting or type of accountability aspect where we're talking to the superintendents and the trustees in these respective school districts, kind of asking them, what are you doing to support these folks, right? What are you doing to implement this plan to address the lack of positive outcomes for our Black students in these schools, right? And to that point, though, it is a lot of soft power. Maybe it is showing the public comment and calling them out. Maybe it is letting the superintendent of the school district know, hey, you're not doing this, and we want to help you in this. And SCOE's job is to provide technical assistance for these school districts. If that means SCOE has to lead the implementation and all they have to do is approve it as a majority on the board, then I have no problem with showing up to board meetings and saying, hey, we are doing this as a SCOE team. We want your buy-in. Most SCOE trustees are not showing up to local unified school districts. Again,
I've never seen one, initial point.
They do not do that. They do not. Let SCOE trustees do not do that because they do not care. I have no problem showing up and calling out a trustee and say you're not doing your job to serve this community. And to that point, though, not the previous question. If you're not trying to do this work, if you're not actively trying to improve outcomes, I have no problem looking for a replacement for you. Like I don't like I know I'm being so serious. It isn't just accountability for me. If you are not doing your job, you have to get booted out, right? And so I think for me, I'm a firm believer in trying to do the soft power, working with people, building relationships, having the meetings, having periodic updates to see what the implementation plan, of course. But then after that, if there's still no pull with them, then it is showing up to the board meetings and saying, hey, I'm here with the Black Youth Leadership Project. I'm here with Black Parallel School Board as a SCOE trustee. I'm disappointed in the lack of work that y'all are doing. And so when it comes to the inability to have hard power, it is important to uplift the voice that we do have and to bring community there. And I'll close it out with this.
She don't want you to close yet. She don't want you to close yet.
Okay, let me close out this question. Let me close out this question and then the next question. Let me close this question, which is just that there is so many trusted partners and CBOs in this community who do this work. And I'm not a believer, and this is something I want to talk about, I'm not a believer in reinventing the wheel. I said earlier, I want to take the work they're doing and amplifying it and scale it to greater practice and impact for all the children in this county, right? And so for me, it's also about uplifting those folks. And maybe it is going around the school districts and saying, well, let's just invest more in these CBOs and these trusted partners are doing this work. Because if you're not going to get it in 9 to 5, let's ensure the students have it after for 5 to 7, or they have it on the weekends as well. I think tapping into our trusted partners, because SCOE can say, do an immigration town hall on their own, they may get 5 to 10 people. But if you work with an immigration-based organization, you yield a greater impact and turnout because you're leaning and working with your trusted partners. So leaning on the folks who are on the ground doing this work is important to me. I have no problem in doing that, and uplifting the CBOs are already doing this work as well.
I love that.
And Davon, just to like emphasize your point, the data shows that community partners are best utilized during the school day. That is when we can most impact academic success, stop the disproportionate disciplining of young people, specifically Black students. We can help curb anti-Blackness, and we can provide social emotional learning as well as all of this in a culturally relevant framework. I say all this to say, do the trustees, because I don't know if
which trustees are you talking about?
The SCOE trustees, thank you, sis. Do the SCOE trustees have budgets tied to their districts that they control that can help fund community partners or supplemental programmings for the areas that they oversee?
So from my understanding, I actually asked the trustee this directly about a couple months ago. From my understanding, there is no money specifically for each trustee is what I was told, but there is just unrestricted funding and kind of serves as kind of grant funding that you can give, right? There's money that's tied to pay or this program. So it may not be a specific trustee has like their little budget, but there's unrestricted funding that with a 4-person majority can direct the board to spend X, Y, and Z, right? And so school districts typically will partner with CBOs and provide them kind of grant money to this work. And more, like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing this work on the Sacramento Children's Fund, right? 40% of cannabis tax revenue is funding youth services. I'm one of 9 on that commission. And the work that money has predominantly gone to CBOs. And now, yes, there is a critique of the nonprofit industrial complex, right? Yes. Yeah. Right. But a lot of these folks are trusted partners who've been doing this work for decades. And if they're not going to have the positive outcomes in a year or two when we're auditing the work, then you pull the funding back, or essentially they're not given the funding again, right? And so for me, I really do believe in tapping into our trusted community partners who are doing this work. I don't pretend to be an expert. I have 7 people on the SCOE board. I don't pretend to be an expert on all these issues, but you all are the experts. And then so when you talk about this isn't a campaign stop, it's a conversation, because I don't want the conversation to stop after this. If elected, I want to be able to continue to come back and work with you all and recognize like what is happening, right? And what can we uplift in these school districts? How can we work together on this, right? So that's the work that I really want to tap into, and that we have trusted CBO partners. And I benefited from city programs growing up, also benefited from the Boys and Girls Club. And right there in Lemon Hill. And so I'm a firm believer in supporting our trusted community partners who are doing this work, because sometimes it doesn't work in our 9 to 5. To your point, though, you're right. The data does show it is best incorporated in there. During my time, we had different orgs that was there to support young Black girls and young Black boys as well at St. Hope. And so it's important, whether it's during lunch or an off period, to invest during the 9 to 5 classroom hours. So that I completely concur with you there.
Well, we'd like to thank you for taking some time to sit with us. I know we have run out of time. We're almost 10 minutes over. So we're going to be quiet and let people get back to their day. But before we leave, we want to let you know that 2026 Celebration Weekend is coming the weekend of June 19th through the 21st. We will be hosting our soiree, our family fun day in the park, as well as our Black grad. So make sure that you are in the building for that. The save the date is up. We're looking for promoters and graduates. If you have any young people in your circle that are graduating or promoting, I'm talking to SES, I'm talking to Voice of the Youth, I'm talking to Roberts Family Development Center, all of you. If you have young people that you want to highlight, make sure that you guys tap into us for Celebration Weekend. With that, we are out of time. I'm going to hit up the peace sign. We're going to throw the peace sign at you, and we will see you next week, 4:30 PST right here on Facebook and YouTube. We are Black versus the Board of Education. Peace.
Thank you.